Hey, all, everybody, and welcome to another edition of me sitting and rambling about Lost during the length of a Lost episode. This week, I am going to be playing Confidence Man on mute while rambling about things relevant to this episode and probably things not relevant to the episode, but all of which will likely contain many, many spoilers for future events in the series. The point of these specific podcast episodes are for me to be able to talk about things with full series spoilers, um, whereas the other two types of podcast episodes, we tend to avoid spoiling anything ahead of where we're at. Um, so yeah, today I'm going to be doing that with Confidence Man. You do not have to watch along with me. I will, if I'm talking about a specific scene that's on screen, I will try and do a good job of describing the scene that I'm referring to. Um, and then, yeah, you guys can just listen to this as a standard podcast episode. That said, if you were wanting to watch along with me, I will let you know that I am now pressing play on the Blu-ray, and I will let you know when the first image appears. And there we go. We've started the recap with Sun being told to button her shirt. You don't need to be spot on on as far as you'll be close enough synced up if you started it around the same time. Um, but yeah, like I said, today we're talking about Confidence Man, and yeah, here in the recap we see Saeed was knocked out by an anonymous person. Um, so I want to start talking about that. Uh, Normally I save comments that I received that I want to respond to. I normally save that for the end after the episode's done playing. Um, Today there are a couple of comments that I want to like just go ahead and address and talk about while the episode's playing because they're very relevant to this episode, and then a couple more I'm going to save for the very end, like normal. Um, so okay, the first one that I want to talk about um, comes from. I'm sorry. Yeah. So there's two of them, and I'm trying to remember which one I wanted to start with. Um, yeah, I think I'll start with Time Gentleman's, otherwise known as Ben Ward. Um, he actually has a few things in his comments, and um, I'm going to address the first one now. The other ones I'm going to save for the very end. Um, but okay, in this first part, he's responding to what I said uh, last week when I was talking during the Moth. Um, and he was referring to basically, I expressed that I don't love the way that the mystery of who attacked Saeed was ultimately resolved. Um, More specifically, I feel like they waited such a long time to even bring that back up that a lot of us weren't even particularly expecting that answer or still thinking about it. And um, I felt that if they had just never brought it up again, we could have just assumed that Ethan had done it, or I mean, somebody nearby, that Ethan was in communication with, perhaps, because by that point in the series, near the end of season one, um, we knew that Ethan had infiltrated the camp. It makes sense that the others wouldn't want the 815ers to go exploring the island looking for this signal. And Saeed was going to triangulate, kind of where to go. Um, so yeah, in my opinion, it was an answer that we didn't really need to have answered so explicitly, and more importantly, um, in my opinion, the way that Locke answers it seemed really forced and a bit contrived to me, because the like his reason for revealing this to Saeed and for revealing this to the audience is presented as, well, I need to get Saeed to trust me here, So let me reveal something that he doesn't already know. But obviously, the nature of what he reveals, which is that he attacked Saeed, knocked him unconscious, and destroyed the equipment. Not exactly something that's going to win over Saeed's trust. So it just never really felt organic to me the way that was revealed. Okay, I think that's enough context. I'll actually get into Ben's comment here. Um, it's just a matter of taste, of course, but for me that works because they didn't really need to do it. They gave us a free answer that we weren't even really waiting for, and they revealed that rather than it being tied into there are the other sorry, without it being tied into there are others and they are dangerous story, which really didn't need bolstering. It tied into Locke is actively trying to keep everyone on the island in dangerous ways, which is, in my opinion, a more interesting way to answer it. It doesn't feel contrived or desperate like, say, Ben just straight up playing a video for the audience with answers about the Hurlybird. Okay, so yeah, that's the part I wanted to address here or now. I want to talk about the parts that I agree with there first. He says that he appreciated it being that the answer to who attacked Saeed, he liked how it tied into the idea of Locke actively trying to keep everyone on the island and doing so in dangerous ways, versus the idea of it being the others and them being dangerous, and that didn't really need more to be added to it. Like, that was already working well enough on its own. I agree with all of that. What I want to clarify about what I was saying was, I'm not saying I would want them to have revealed that it was Ethan. Maybe like later on in season 3, like it could have been casually mentioned, or established when they're talking about what Ethan was up to. Again, I'm not saying that I wanted that or needed that or anything like that. My point was, like, I don't feel like that we needed an explicit answer by the time that we get one. But I also agree that Locke doing it for the reasons that he did it is more interesting than the others. And I'd say it makes an equal amount of sense as the others doing it. Like I think both of those motivations and the opportunities that both of those people had make sense. But although, yeah, maybe it's worth mentioning because I don't think I did last week. In the show as it exists, it's never established how Locke would have known about the French transmission, as he tells Saeed that he did. Like when Locke reveals to Saeed that he's the one that attacked him, Locke explains, like, oh, you were trying to track down the source of this transmission that was saying this, and this. It's not established in the existing show how Locke would possibly know that. Whereas it would make more sense for the others to know that, because, it's been playing for 16 years. They would know. They'd be spying on the 815ers and would therefore likely have figured out what Saeed was up to. So all of that's to say, for that reason, I think the Ethan thing makes a bit more sense. But if we kind of accept certain things that were cut, that we've been talking about on the podcast about how Locke would have deduced these things, then yeah, I think that works. I think it's fine. Anyway, yeah. So anyway, I also like the idea of Locke doing it for the reasons that he did it. It does fit into the arc. Locke's arc for this season ends with him giving that speech to Jack about, like, everything that happened has led us on this path, and he even refers to Boone's death as a sacrifice that the island demanded. These are scary things to hear someone say, someone who really believes what they're saying. That suggests he's going down a road that could be very frightening. So I do agree that him attacking Saeed fits into that and helps support that. But again, what I really didn't like about the reveal isn't the explanation of who it was and why they did it. It's the lack of sensible or motivation for Locke to reveal that in that moment. It feels like it was only revealed in that moment, um, because the writers felt like we might want that answer, or they felt like they were obligated to answer that, or something, along those lines. And all of that is what makes it feel contrived to me. It's not. Yeah, yeah, I agree. It's not as contrived as like, oh, here's a video, explaining all this stuff. Um, but yeah, it doesn't feel super organic to me. But yeah, like I said, I just wanted to clarify my feelings on that, while also expressing that I do agree, that yeah, it does help with Locke's arc, in that element of it. But okay, and then going ahead into um, the other comment that I want to address right up front. This one comes from Lucas43434, who, um, sorry, yeah, no, I'm like distracted by what's going on in the episode, and um, because there's certain things I want to make sure that I remember to say. Well, so okay, yeah, so right now we're at the chopping firewood scene, where Kate comes to him. Kate comes to Sawyer and, is like, "What do you want for the inhalers?" Sawyer's being kind of playful about this. I mean, that's my read on it. Um, and it's when Kate says, "I don't buy the act. No one's this gross," that he gets really angry. And in order to get her to buy the act, he confronts her with the letter and presents it as though he's the one that it was written um, to make her disgusted by him, and to make her, um, revolted by him, I guess. Um, so yes, talking about all that, something in our group discussion that Drew, the one that has seen the show before, Drew made a comment, in that group discussion that Lucas quoted in his comment, and basically what Drew had said was, he's a con man. His whole game was making people like him and trust him. But on the island, sorry, and on the island, he could have been a nice guy and kept the con going, but we know he didn't choose to do that. And then what Lucas said in response to that was, Drew's comment there kind of blew my mind. All the times I've watched this show, I've never thought about how the Sawyer we're introduced to is already so different from the man he was only a few days before the plane crashed. We're getting to know him at a very specific, very weird time in his life, already in the first stages of some major character growth. Okay, so yes, I agree with all that, except I do have a different perspective, with the very end of what Lucas said there. I don't know that I would classify it as, the first stages of some major character growth. I mean, in a way, it is, because all right, let me just explain what I mean. Sawyer, we later find out that Sawyer killed a man very shortly before getting on this plane and it crashing, and so yes, like Drew said, Sawyer takes a bit of a different tact here. Um, Instead of, yeah, pretending to be the nice guy and potentially conning people out of things, he makes himself very unlikable and detestable. And I do think that fits with everything that I've been saying about the self-loathing and wanting people to hate him. And obviously, I'm not the only one that says that. Kate herself says that in this episode. I think part of the motivation there for why he takes that tact instead of trying to present himself as a nice guy, um, is because of what he recently did. He recently killed this guy, and now he's stuck with these people for who knows how long. At first maybe it's only going to be a few days, um, but the fact that he's going to be with these people for a longer period of time than he was planning on being around anybody in the near future, he, in my opinion, yeah, wants them to hate him. He doesn't want anybody to feel sorry for him, to like him, and I think that was true before. but it's much more so the case now because of him killing the wrong man. And again, it goes back to the pilot when he's reading the letter, and he sees the group going on the trek with the transceiver, and he decides to join them. And yeah, he stays to confront the polar bear. He doesn't even pull the gun out for a minute. It almost seems like he was wanting to die, maybe. Um, which, yeah, fits with him telling Jack to let him die in this episode. What I'm saying is, I think everything that I've said so far in these other two podcast episodes about Sawyer and his self-loathing, I 100% like. I think that is very true. What I haven't mentioned because I couldn't in the spoiler free episodes is his self-loathing is at an all-time high at the time of the crash because of what he just did. Not only has he become the man that he hated and was hunting, and therefore wants to punish himself for that, wants to punish Sawyer for that. Um, he also just murdered a man that he had no good reason to murder. Not that there's necessarily a good reason to murder, but what I mean is like he killed a man that even in his eyes was completely innocent and undeserving of that. Um, and yeah, so I mean, again, his self-loathing is at an all-time high when the plane crashes, and I think that has to do with why he really wants the 815ers to hate him. He doesn't want Kate to feel sorry for him. He doesn't want to accept that sympathy. So again, that's why I almost want to label it character growth. In a way, it's kind of a regression. That said, I mean, it is an important part of his journey in becoming the Sawyer that he becomes later on. Um, Now we're at the scene where Sawyer's getting beat by Jack in the caves, and what I love about that scene, and I don't think I talked about that enough, uh, really in either of the previous episodes, but I don't think I even brought it up in the main podcast episode. But yeah, like Sawyer doesn't fight back, and he keeps looking before it even cuts away to the people watching. Like it shows Sawyer looking to like make sure that people are watching this and seeing this. And like that's a whole other thing that Sawyer's about in this episode is he hates himself for becoming this person, um, but I think he wants to believe that everybody else is no better than him. That I think he has trouble sitting with the fact that he was somehow weaker or worse, like more bad than most people because he did this. Um, and so yeah, like this whole episode, he wants to prove like Jack isn't so much better than him. Like, yeah, he wants to prove that Jack and him are. I don't know why I'm struggling so much with how to say this. I haven't found the right words, and I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I mean. Um, he hates himself, but he wants to believe that nobody else is like that much better than him. I don't know. I'm going to give up. I'm just repeating myself at this point. Hopefully, like the essence of what I'm trying to say makes sense. So yeah, he wants Jack to beat him in front of everybody, and then he wants Jack to torture him. Like he says, yeah, it has to be this way. And then he tries to talk Jack into letting him die. Um, and obviously, part of that is the self-loathing, but also part of it, I think, is trying to prove that Jack is no better than him. Um, so yeah, okay. I think that's enough of that. Now I'm trying to go back through my head about stuff that I was talking through. Oh, I was talking through Locke giving Saeed the knife and pointing Saeed in Sawyer's direction by floating the possibility of Sawyer using the cigarette as a delayed fuse. Um, so in our group discussion of Solitary, which is not out yet, Yeah, I believe that's when this was discussed. Or no, was it? I don't know. At some point, the other Drew, the Drew that has not seen the show before, was talking. I think it was maybe in the Confidence Man episode. Um, Locke giving the knife to Saeed, like being almost like he was trying to get Saeed. Oh my goodness! No, I'm sorry. I'm remembering now. It was my uncle, my co-host on the regular podcast, and I don't remember why, but for some reason that section of the podcast, um, I cut it. I don't remember if we got into spoilers, and that's why I didn't want to. No, that's exactly what it was. I'm sorry. So yeah, we ended up talking about the fact that it was Locke that hit Saeed over the head, and yeah, because we're not getting into spoilers in those main episodes, I cut that out. But while talking about that, um, we like my uncle was saying like, oh, so Locke was really like setting Sawyer up there, like trying to get him hurt. And I just wanted to say I don't think that that's what Locke was trying to do. I think giving Saeed the knife was more so part of him trying to direct suspicion away from himself. He fully acknowledges that he doesn't have an alibi, um, and so by giving Saeed not only reason to think that it's the person that he already has animosity with, um, he also gives him the knife, which surely the person that attacked him wouldn't do. He gives him the knife and says, in case there's a next time. He's basically telling him like, here's this knife to protect yourself from future attacks. I think what that's meant to do is, on some level assure Saeed that like, okay, well yeah, the man that attacked me wouldn't give me a weapon to defend myself with from future attacks. Um, that's all I think Locke's motivation was. I don't think that he was predicting that Saeed would use the knife on Sawyer to like fatally wound him or anything. Um, yeah, I mean that's my opinion, anyways. But I thought it was worth talking about because yeah, we couldn't talk about that in the spoiler free episodes because to do so would be to talk about um, Locke knowing that Sawyer wasn't actually guilty and giving Saeed the knife, while simultaneously directing Saeed into suspecting Sawyer. So yeah, there's that. Oh, I once again forgot to pull up the translations because yeah, I did the translation that I'm curious to look up for this episode. I think I'm going to start doing this in our main podcast episodes, by the way, because that way I'll have it prepared in my notes, and then I can talk about it with my co-host. Not that I expect it will usually lead to any kind of deep conversation, um, but it's tricky when I've watched the episode multiple times. It's tricky to remember what and being other episodes ahead, like multiple episodes ahead of the commentaries, it's hard to remember what is untranslated in the episode that I'm on, if that makes sense. Whereas if the first time I'm sitting down and watching these and taking my notes, I'm like, oh, here we go. Here's a scene, where it's not subtitled. I can jot that down in my notes, pull up the translation, put that in my notes, and then just talk about it the first time that I talk about the episode. Um, yeah, that's what I'm gonna start doing. Because the next couple don't really. Well, that's not true. In Solitary, there's a little tiny bit. Um, Starting with all the best cowboys have daddy issues. I don't even know if anything is unsubtitled there, but starting with that one, that's where I'm going to start putting those in my notes. Um, but okay, so I'm gonna pull up. Confidence Man Confidence Man transcript. Yeah, I don't even think that Locke doesn't know that Saeed was a torturer. Locke doesn't know that things are going to escalate to the point where they torture Sawyer to try and get the inhalers. Um, so yeah, that's again, that's me. um, Stressing my opinion, I guess, that I don't think that Locke's goal was to get Sawyer severely injured or killed. Sorry, I'm scrolling through this transcript. So yeah, then here where they pause the torture, Sawyer says, "No, don't stop now." They're like, "What the hell is wrong with you?" Again, like he wants himself to suffer, and then even when he kind of caves, like it's more of a pride thing, I think. But he needs it to be on his terms. Like he needs to, he can't give in to them doing this to him. He has to feel like it was his. It's the deal that he came up with. Well, so this is interesting. Uh, I'll wait till we get to the scene where Jen confronts Sun to talk about this translation. All I was going to say about why it's interesting is that the transcript itself has it translated, which is not normally the case. I mean, not so far from the ones I've been looking at with the first 7 episodes. Normally, it has the Korean text, and then if it wasn't subtitled, it doesn't say what it means, and then I have to like copy and paste it to Google Translate. Um, but in this transcript, it actually seems to be translated. But anyways, right now we're in the flashback scene where Sawyer is meeting with the momster, who I guess is named Kilo, who I called Kylo. Funnily enough, at first. I was like, yeah, Kilo probably makes more sense. Um, I'm trying to remember if I had anything to say about this. Yeah, he says that Sawyer needs to bring him the $160,000 plus 50%, which means that Sawyer would need to bring him $240,000 the next day. Um, so yeah, so if you take the $240,000, I'm trying to do some math here. He was gonna have, he already has 140. Like he still has 140 of the 160 that was originally loaned to him. Then he was gonna get 160 from David and Jessica, and then he'd have to give back the 140 plus the 8,000. Sorry, so that only leaves him with a $6,000 profit, like for himself. Which I don't know. I mean, yeah, I know he's not exactly at this point doing it for the money, but like not entirely. It just it seems like a lot of work maybe for $6,000. Um, but hey, what do I know? I mean, well, and the plus 50% seems like that may have been a new condition. Um, I think Kilo's getting irritated with Sawyer, giving his money to um, civilians, as he calls them. Yeah, I think that I think that the 50% thing was a new condition out of annoyance with Sawyer. Um, but yeah, all that's to say, if Sawyer had actually gone through with this, he would have only walked away with $6,000 profit. Um, Now you get the kiss. This is something that I wanted to mention in the main podcast episode, but completely forgot about. Um, Sho Koss, who I've referred to before, has his own channel of Lost videos. I'm sure most of you know who I'm talking about, but essentially he does um, videos on every episode of Lost, kind of mapping the island, as well as talking about some behind the scenes stuff and some of his own theories and interpretations of things. Um, Basically, way back in his first season of videos, he mentioned in the Confidence Man episode something that I had never heard before or realized before, um, which is that where Kate and Sawyer kiss here, where he was being tortured, is the same place where um, Kate removed the like where Walt found the handcuffs, and therefore where Walt found them. And given what, like, so in season 2, in the episode What Kate Did, where we kind of find out um, Kate's feelings for Sawyer and how conflicted she is about those feelings, um, she's attracted to him um, because, like, that whole episode's about, like, how Kate has her biological father is inherently a part of her, and she hates that, and that's part of why she kills him. At the same time, her killing him in and of itself kind of verifies that she has that darkness in her, um, and that's why she goes off in Jack. She goes off on Jack in that episode. She says, "I'm sorry, I'm not as good as you." She kind of can't stand that Jack is so good. I mean, it's part of what she loves about him, but um, it reminds her that she's not that. Whereas Sawyer, I think she relates to a lot more, but she also hates that because it's a reminder that her biological father is part of her, um, that she'll never be good. She'll never have anything good, I think is how she puts it to the unconscious Sawyer. Um, so with all that, so with all of that, I think it's so fitting and poetic and awesome that her first kiss with Sawyer is in the place where she removed the handcuffs and then walked out to meet Jack. Um, yeah, there's so many ways in which I think that's very cool and great writing. I don't know how intentional it was, or if it was just like like, oh well, let's just use this look. I don't know how much thought went into, like, oh, this is where Walt found the handcuffs, so let's have um, let's have Kate and Sawyer's first kiss there. I don't I wouldn't be surprised if that was in no way a conscious decision on the part of the people making the show. But um, from just reading it, you know, just looking at the story itself and not, trying to guess at what happened behind the scenes and whether or not that was intentional, I think it adds some pretty cool meaning to uh, to that element of the story. But okay, here was the scene where Jin, like, it just ended, but Jin found Michael handing the plants to Sun, and I guess what he said, nobody is going to be shocked to find this out, but he essentially said, "What are you doing with him? Why are you sneaking around with this man? What's going on?" And then we talked about that a little bit in the group discussion. That Sun just doesn't respond to him and walks off. And on the one hand, I do like that because it shows, it's like, okay, I don't owe you an answer. Like, you're gonna come at me like this. Um, that's progress for her. That she's like, I don't need to explain myself to you. Certainly not if this is how you're asking that question. Um, On the other hand, though, like, yeah, it does leave Michael in a very awkward position. By her not offering some kind of explanation, it leaves Michael in a very uncomfortable situation. So I do. On the one hand, I like that she doesn't feel the need to explain herself. On the other hand, I do kind of wish she had just said like something along the lines of, "That girl's sick. I'm trying to help her," and then that's it. She doesn't owe him any more explanation than that. Um, but at least that wouldn't have been you know as rough for Michael, I guess. Um, I mean, Michael handles it fine, but the point is that given Jin's history of violence against Michael, not super considerate. um, Now we're at the scene where Sawyer's trying to walk away after seeing the kid. Um, Something that's to think about, and I don't have a strong opinion on this either way, is whether or not Sawyer knew about the kid before this moment. Because I would find it a little weird that he apparently works with this Jessica girl at the dealership, which may or may not be true, by the way. Like that might be how they're explaining that she knows him. He might not actually work at the dealership with her. Not super clear, but the point is he has some level of relationship with this woman. He seems to have known she was married, or again, it's not clear if when she says, "Oh, we can get the rest of this money from my husband," maybe that's the first time. Well, keep in mind he's obviously conning her because he knows about the husband. Uh, what I'm saying is that part of the act that oh, he was acting like he didn't know, and that was the moment she was intentionally revealing it to him. Um, that's not even relevant. The point is, he clearly knows enough about her and the husband to know that the husband has this money. Surely he would know that they had a son. Um, so part of me wonders, and again, I don't have a super strong opinion on this either way. Um, if yeah, he knew about the kid, but it was coming face to face with him that really made him feel like, okay, no, I can't go through with this. Like I can't risk doing what happened to me to this kid. Like I haven't fallen that far. I'm sure those aren't the words that he thinks about it in. But yeah, that's when he walks away at all costs, including, and again, we talked about this in both of the other types of episodes, but he needs to bring Kilo $240,000 in order to not be like in order for Kilo to not want to find and kill him. So by leaving their briefcase behind, the one with $160,000, even if he had walked out of there with $140,000, that was not nearly enough to resolve the issue. He still would have had to go into hiding from this guy, like had to have gone on the lam or whatever you want to call it. I mean, I'm sure Sawyer moves around after each con, anyways. But the point is, he would then need to, cover his tracks so that this guy doesn't find him. Um, so even just leaving one briefcase would have made that the case. So it's not that insane that he would also leave the second one behind in an attempt to extract himself from this confrontation. Um, yeah. And now we have the part where so yeah, Kate confronted him with the letter, and then he actually tells her his story a little bit. Like he opens up to her a bit. Um, so in a way that is progress. But then when he sees her feeling sorry for him, that's where he pushes her away and rejects that sympathy. Um, so it's not exactly progress, but it's also not exactly. I would say it is a little bit of progress. Maybe it's like a step forward and then a step back. However you want to describe it. The point is, I do think that this. We talk about this in the episodes on Solitary coming up, but at the start of the next episode, Sawyer's getting his bandages changed by Jack, and Jack says that he's there because nobody else wants anything to do with him. And Sawyer, it seems like maybe that boy bothers Sawyer for like half a second, and then he like goes right back to being a dick and is like, well, she does. And then Jack's like, okay, change your own bandages. And then from there in that episode, uh, like Sawyer's arc, if you will, in the next episode is, he expresses that the crowd isn't so hot on him. And Kate says, if I were you, I'd make more of an effort. And then he does. He does make more of an effort. And, you could maybe see that as a contradiction of this episode establishing that he wants to be hated. But I don't really feel like that's true. I think that, again, like he does make a tiny bit of progress here when he confides in Kate. And then what Jack says to him at the beginning of the next episode, I think does get to him. He as Sawyer himself says in the pilot, he's a complex guy. We're all complex human beings with contradictory impulses, I guess. There's still a part of him that and I think that part of him is coming more to the surface after the events of this episode. There's a part of him that craves community and being accepted and all that. So yeah, I don't. I think my point with all that, getting on all that now, is while while I have already said previously that Sawyer kind of rejects redemption or progress in this episode by pushing Kate away and by not burning the letter at the very end. I've talked about how that kind of breaks the pattern of people overcoming their demons. And while I still think that's true, like he doesn't exactly overcome his demons in this episode, there is a bit of progress that gets built upon in the upcoming episodes. So yeah, just worth noting that. Now we get into Sayid leaving. What I find funny about this, maybe this will sound like a nitpick or something, but like it always feels to me like Sayid starts walking past Kate as if he's just going to walk away without saying goodbye. And then she's like, Sayid, where are you going? And then he stops and turns around and then explains all this. But like, if he it seems like he was wanting her to stop him and have him explain this, because like otherwise he would have just walked behind her instead of like, because she's standing on the beach in front of the water, like there's plenty of room behind her. I don't know. It just seemed real, not passive aggressive. That's not the right word because he's not being aggressive. I don't know. It's like if you wanted to explain to her what you're like, if you want to say goodbye to her, just say goodbye to her instead of like walking in front of her dramatically and having her stop you. Anyways, I said that might be a little nitpicky, but it just always kind of makes me chuckle, I guess. Yeah, I'm trying to. The episode's wrapping up. Trying to remember if there's any little bit I want to say. Sorry. I'm going to talk about that more next week too. I mean, I have a lot to talk about with Solitary, given what that episode introduces. But yeah, I think I'm going to talk more. I'm going to try and talk more next week about Sayid's reasons for leaving the camp at the end of this episode versus kind of what he says to Rousseau, and then him being okay with returning to the group after what he experiences with Rousseau. Because I feel like that could be seen as kind of contradictory. But yeah, I have thoughts on that. Anywho, it's time to thank my... We're in the credits of the episode, so it is therefore time for me to do my credits for the candidates that support this podcast. Thank you to candidate number 90, Ben Ward, candidate number 108, Jeffrey Winslow, candidate number 69, Brian Phillips, candidate number 32, Chuck Boyd, and candidate 341, Hans. If you too would like to become a candidate, you can do so for as little as $1. Even a one-time donation will get you permanently displayed on the candidate cave wall in all video versions of this podcast, as well as any video essays or whatever other videos I make regarding Lost. It will also get you credited verbally in every podcast episode for 30 days after that one-time donation. Now, if you sign up for recurring donations, then you will continue to be verbally credited in all versions of the podcast episodes for as long as you are an active donor. You can become a candidate or become a supporter by going to kofi.com/candlepun or patreon.com/candlepun. I would also like to take the opportunity to thank the multiple people that have donated equipment and resources used in the production of this podcast. Those include Mary Mullins, Brandon Huth, Charles Huth, William McMinn, and Charlene McMinn. But okay, so now I want to get to the other couple of comments, the other couple parts of Ben Ward's comment. So the rest of this is... Sorry, computer is lagging. The rest of this is responding to the Moth episode and what was discussed on there. Ben says, "First off, I think I missed all of the symbolism in this episode, even the really obvious stuff, so it works for me." Yeah, and then part of what he's referring to there, as well as what he's about to be responding to, is the Reddit comment left by Runnin' Reed for our Moth episode. But okay, so Ben continues. About this situation being too contrived because it's the perfect one for Charlie to solve, you could argue that he already had one of those with the drowning woman. He was first, or early, at the scene, and he's, I believe, a strong swimmer. Which, yeah, I myself would... he's at least a decent swimmer, I would argue, based on what we find out later. But because he's still most concerned about his drugs or under their influence, Ben's referring to the two... My uncle had the interpretation that maybe he didn't try to save her because he was worried about ruining his drugs that he had on his person. Whereas my opinion was, or my interpretation of it, was that he was probably high at the time and probably knew that he couldn't do anything. Or, he would have been more of a liability, like more of a hazard to the situation than somebody that could help resolve it. But because he's still most concerned about his drugs or under their influence, he fails that challenge. Now, having had some pep talk from Locke and started to come off the drugs, he is presented with another custom-fit challenge, and this time he passes. So that's another way to look at it. Yeah, I think we had talked about... I don't even feel like it was particularly custom tailored to Charlie. I feel like other people were capable of doing what Charlie does in that episode, but he's the one that makes the case for why he should do it. We also talked about how I didn't think that was particularly... I don't need to get into everything I've already said. Obviously, I've said it multiple times, and that's what Ben's referring to, so it's probably pointless for me to repeat myself. But yeah, I agree. That's another good way to look at it. Okay, so continuing on with what Ben has to say, he says, "I have also found his emotions and motivations a little hard to track in the flashback scenes, or in the flashback scene where he first does heroin. For me, because he has the confrontation with Liam, then considers the heroin, and only then cries as he decides to take it, it feels like he decides to take it because only if he and his brother are on the same trajectory will they be able to stay together in the band. If Charlie continues not to take it, and either tries to get Liam off it or distances himself, the whole thing, and perhaps their relationship, will fall apart anyway. The issue is, this seems like an extreme solution and not fully set up by the story so far. But then again, that's a problem a lot of these flashbacks have. They basically have to cram every important moment of a person's life into a handful of short sequences. I think that as viewers, we sometimes have to accept the shorthand. Another example is Hurley's abandonment of his father leads him to comfort eat, being condensed down into his father literally gives him a chocolate bar as comfort as he leaves. Across the Sea is another one. It's 2 entire lives that could easily have been given an entire season, condensed into 40 minutes. Yeah, so I really agree with that last part, that we as viewers have to accept the shorthand sometimes. Because, yeah, I mean, especially early on, they're really trying to establish in like 10, my estimate would be about 10 minutes, maybe closer to 15. In 10 to 15 minutes of an episode, they have to establish, a character's motivations for turning out the way that they are. Yeah, I agree with, and I think that Hurley example is the perfect one, about comfort eating and them having to be a bit more, in order to illustrate that, you kind of have to give that more on the nose thing as the implication, because you can't just do a quick montage of like Hurley starting to eat a bunch after, his father leaves. I mean, you could, but that would almost feel more obnoxious, I think, and it would certainly be more, um, tedious to film. And um, yeah, so that part I really agree with. But going back to the part where Ben says it feels like he decides to take it only if he and his brother are on the same trajectory, will they be able to stay together in the band? Um, well, but my thing with that is like Charlie was pretty resolute in his decision to call off the tour, and he certainly was willing to break off the band at the beginning of the episode. So I don't think. I think prior to what Liam says in that scene, I don't think Charlie would have particularly minded, um, disbanding the band and, walking away. I don't think that he would have cared at all. I think it's only because of what Liam says and it coming from him and the other things that he says in there, that's when Charlie like feels like he needs the band. Liam makes him feel that way. Um, and then it's just so the hurt of that and maybe the not feeling able to escape from the situation, or not feeling able to fix the situation. I think all of that comes together in like this pain that he's feeling, and yeah, I do think that maybe there's a sense of inevitability that Charlie feels in that moment. That it's like, okay, like if this is who I am, like Liam saying, what use am I if I'm not in this band? Like that means I'm nothing without this band, and therefore, if this is what it means to be in the band, then yeah, here I guess I'm fated to be this. And so yeah, I think looking at it that way, it does kind of, um, add to Charlie's despair. Because I do agree, like his despair does seem at least partly, um, coming from the action of taking the heroin. Like as he goes through the process of dumping it onto the table and undoing the rubber band, like he seems to be becoming more and more distraught. And I think that if you're looking at it through the lens of, again, like him feeling like this is inevitable, I have to be this. I think that really works. That said, everything else that I've said before about the pain, of everything that his brother says to him in that moment and what that does to his identity and his self worth, I think the pain of that also is a huge factor in, okay, this thing is here in front of me. It is the one thing that could potentially alleviate my pain. Um, I think that still holds, but yeah, I think Ben's right to point out, um, something that I hadn't really considered or talked about, which is in fact, part of what I said was that in that moment he's probably not thinking like, oh, this is what I'm going to be now. I'm going to be the drug addict. Whereas the point Ben makes kind of brings me around to, well, actually, I think maybe on some level he did. I think on some level he did, think in that moment, like, well, this is who I'm going to be now. Uh, and that's part of why he's so upset, and devastated. So I think that's a really good point. But okay, I'm trying to remember if there was another part of that I wanted to circle back to. I think that was about it. So yeah, that's everything I have for this one. In about a week, you'll see another one of these about solitary. In between now and then, you will see our other two. You'll see our main podcast episode about solitary, and you'll see our group discussion on solitary. Let's see how many more times I can say solitary. But all right, I hope you guys come back for any and all of that. And as always, namaste and good luck.